Hi, this is Kristen, and I'm covering section 4.6 in the OER online textbook. Sorry, that was my dog. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about tissue and aging. As we get older, our tissues become thinner and they become drier. They have a tendency to lose moisture and water. Our bodies are mostly made of water, but we dry out as we age. Sometimes very elderly people can have almost just paper thin skin because the tissue thins. Our tissues tend to lose elasticity, and elasticity is the recoil of something to its original shape. So imagine if you grabbed a rubber band and you stretched it out. As soon as you release that stretched rubber band, it recoils to its original shape. That's known as elasticity, the ability of something to rebound to its original shape. And as we get older, if you pull on your skin, it doesn't rebound as quickly as it would if we did that to a young person. Also, our tissue has a tendency to lose this dark pigment called melanin. And melanin protects our skin from damaging ultraviolet rays of the sun. And because we lose melanin, we don't just lose it in our skin, we also lose it in our hair. And so our hair has a tendency to take on a gray appearance, especially if it was originally dark. There are elastic and collagen protein fibers in connective tissue, and we have a tendency to lose that. And that gives our face kind of an appearance of becoming droopier or almost flabbier. And so that has a tendency to happen as we age. Also, we lose muscle tone. Our muscle mass decreases. Our senses deteriorate. A lot of times as we age, we suddenly need glasses or hearing aids. We lose these bone minerals like calcium and phosphates from our bone, and we have a tendency to become shorter. Our height decreases. We lose fluid in our fibrous cartilage discs, our intervertebral discs of our spinal column. And because those have a tendency to dry out, that also makes us a little shorter and more prone to back injuries. Our joints lose cartilage. Our joints tend to stiffen. Our tissues become more rigid, such as blood vessels. A lot of us develop arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries and puts us at a higher risk for stroke and heart attack. Our nerves tend to transmit electrochemical impulses more slowly, and our sensory receptors become less sensitive. Our immune system tends to decline and become more susceptible. And I'm just naming some of them. There are still more changes that take place. Our muscle has a tendency to atrophy, and the term atrophy means that our tissues lose mass through wasting. That's why it's particularly important for people to engage in resistance and strength training as they get older. You can slow the rate of aging by participating in regular exercise, walking, having a healthy lifestyle, eating healthfully, reducing your stress levels. One of the things that tends to happen more frequently in people who are getting older is the development of cancer. Now, cancer is a generic term for many diseases, and cancer is characterized by cells that no longer respond to regulatory signals, and they tend to undergo uncontrolled growth. Unfortunately, they can invade nearby tissues and organs and basically colonize other organ systems. Cancers ultimately rob the blood supply of our normal healthy organs. Now, what causes cancer? Well, that's a big question. Epigenetics, which you may have covered in cell biology for health occupations, is basically the study of changes in organisms caused by the modification of gene expression. rather than actually altering the genetic code itself. So basically, epigenetics is the study of mechanisms that turn genes on and off. And they think that epigenetic modifications can lead to cancer. Alternatively, a genetic mutation is a little different in that it's just a permanent change in the DNA of a cell. Some mutations do not affect cell function. However, if the modification affects proteins, the cell might start to divide abnormally. And when this happens, the cell may be unable to form regular tissues. And so that's when we would potentially develop a tumor or cancer. And so this image shows how cell division is taking place in the upper picture. And then the cell division begins to accelerate. And then ultimately the cells are abnormal and they're not functioning properly, and a carcinoma has developed. And as soon as it breaks into the underlying tissue, then it begins to spread and it becomes cancerous. So, a tumor is a little different than a cancer. Tumor can be benign or it can be cancerous. A tumor is just a mass of cells with an irregular structure that forms in the tissue. If the tumor is benign, it means that it doesn't spread to other tissues. Therefore, it would not be cancerous. However, a tumor that metastasizes becomes cancerous. Metastasize means to spread to other tissues. So a malignant tumor is a cancerous tumor that is metastasized. It's actually breached the boundaries of the tissue. And malignant tumors promote angiogenesis, and that's a term I've used before. Angiogenesis is the formation of new blood vessels from pre-existing vessels. And angiogenesis attracts the growth of capillaries and helps the malignancy spread to other organs. So cancers can get into the lymph and flow through lymphatic vessels, and they can get into the blood and flow through blood vessels, and they'll use these vessels to reach distant parts of the body. Cancers are named after their point of origin. So if a person developed cancer in the bone and it metastasized or spread to the brain, and the cancer in the brain is ultimately what killed the person, it's still referred to as bone cancer because that was the initial beginning point of the cancer. So there are specific names of cancers that reflect the origin of the cancer. So a carcinoma is a cancer that starts in epithelial cells, whereas a myeloma is a cancer that starts in myeloid tissue or blood cells. Myeloid tissue is found in the red bone marrow of adults and in the bone marrow of children. Hematopoietic cells are basically found in myeloid tissue. And a hematopoietic cell is one that forms blood cells. So that would be a myeloma. Now leukemia is cancer of white blood cells, and a white blood cell is called a leukocyte. The suffix "cyte" means cell, and so a leukocyte is a white blood cell, and cancer of white blood cells would be leukemia. Sarcoma is a cancer that begins in connective tissue. When I was younger, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, I was lucky because it was technically called carcinoma in situ. It was an aggressive cancer, but they caught it early enough that it was technically not a cancer because it was stage 0. What that means is it was a malignancy. It was a cancer that would spread. However, the cancer, because it was all contained within the epithelium, imagine if the area that I've colored in here with hash marks is the carcinoma. Because it had not yet breached the underlying tissue. It hadn't spread to the underlying tissue. It was considered to be carcinoma in situ, which basically means it was contained and they could remove it. However, it was they said I was lucky because it was about ready to break through this underlying tissue, and at that point it would have been considered to be a malignancy. So I lucked out. It was an easy thing to remove. All right, so one other thing I wanted to mention was I just want to go back to the beginning of this handout because I want to summarize what we've covered so far. We've covered sections 4.1 on the types of tissues, and we've covered sections 4.6. And if you look at